In the winter of 1418, a wealthy landowner walked away from his comfortable estate, stepped into the freezing mountain mists of Thanh Hoa, and declared war on the most powerful empire on earth. He had no professional army, no treasury, and no foreign allies. His enemy, the Ming Dynasty of China, had just conquered his homeland with hundreds of thousands of battle-hardened soldiers, state-of-the-art gunpowder weapons, and a ruthless policy of total cultural erasure. To any rational observer at the time, this provincial noble's rebellion was a collective suicide mission. Yet, 10 years later, this very same man would force the global superpower to sign a humiliating peace treaty, supply them with the boats and horses to flee, and crown himself the emperor of a reborn nation. How did a desperate band of starving forest rebels survive a decade of relentless pursuit to pull off the greatest military comeback in Southeast Asian history? To understand this incredible underdog story, we have to look past the myths of magic swords and giant turtles and examine the cold, brutal reality of a guerrilla war fought in the mud, the rain, and the shadows of the jungle. Our story begins not with a grand battle, but with a quiet choice. The man was Le Loi, and he was one of the wealthiest men in the southern borderlands of Dong-Chuc, the name the Ming had given to the conquered territory of Vietnam. He owned vast tracts of fertile land, commanded the respect of hundreds of local families, and lived a life of absolute privilege. The occupying Ming administration knew his influence and tried repeatedly to buy his loyalty. They offered him high offices, wealth, and authority within their imperial administration. They wanted to use his local prestige to legitimize their rule. Had Le Loi accepted, he would have lived out his days in luxury, a wealthy collaborator in a colonized land. But Le Loi saw what the occupation was doing to his people. The Ming had systematically burned Vietnamese books, forced the population to adopt foreign customs, and stripped the land of its gold, pearls, and timber. They had reduced a proud kingdom to a mere province, treating its citizens as second-class subjects. Le Loi chose a different path. He quietly began using his wealth to shelter outlaws, feed the displaced, and recruit men who shared his quiet fury. He was preparing for a storm that everyone knew was coming, but no one believed could be won. To understand why Le Loi's rebellion seemed so utterly hopeless, we must look at the sheer scale of the empire he was defying. In the early 15th century, the Ming Dynasty was at the absolute zenith of its global power. This was the era of the Yongle Emperor, a ruler of boundless ambition who constructed the Forbidden City, sent the massive treasure fleets of Xinghe across the Indian Ocean, and possessed a military machine unmatched anywhere on the globe. In 1406, exploiting a period of deep political division and civil strife within Vietnam, the Ming launched a massive invasion force across the border. They claimed they were restoring the rightful Tran dynasty, but once their boots were on the ground, they quickly dropped the pretense. They annexed the country, renaming it Giao, and set about dismantling Vietnamese identity. The occupation was brutal, systematic, and total. The Ming administration banned local traditions, confiscated all Vietnamese literature to be sent to Nanjing or burned on the spot, and forced the population to dress in Chinese styles. They established state monopolies on salt and iron, demanded crushing taxes, and forced thousands of locals into dangerous labor, diving for pearls in the South China Sea, or hunting elephants in malaria-ridden jungles for ivory. The old Vietnamese ruling class was either executed, forced into hiding, or co-opted. For a decade, several uprisings broke out, led by members of the old Tran royal family. But one by one, the Ming military crushed them with terrifying efficiency, utilizing advanced firearms, massive cavalry charges, and a network of heavily fortified bases. By 1416, the country was silent, paralyzed by fear and exhaustion. It was in this atmosphere of absolute despair that Le Loi made his move. He did not claim royal blood, nor did he possess a grand army. He was a local champion, a man of the soil who understood the people of the mountains. In the spring of 1416, in the secluded valley of Long Nai, Le Loi gathered 18 of his most trusted companions, including a brilliant exiled scholar named Nguyen Trai. Together they performed a sacred oath. They mingled their blood with wine, swore a covenant of absolute loyalty to each other and to the cause of liberation, and vowed to fight until the occupiers were driven from their land. This was the Long Nai Oath, a quiet pact made in the shadows of the forest, which would become the emotional foundation of a 10-year struggle. They knew the odds. They knew that if they failed, their families would be wiped out and their names erased from history. But they also knew that submission was a slow, agonizing death for their culture. On the day of the Lunar New Year in 1418, Le Loi officially launched the Lam Sun Uprising, declaring himself the pacifying king. The response from the Ming was swift and devastating. They did not view Le Loi as a legitimate political rival, but as a minor bandit leader to be hunted down and exterminated. Almost immediately, the rebels were forced out of their base in Lam Sun and driven deep into the rugged, inhospitable peaks of Chi Linh Mountain. The early years of the rebellion were a nightmare of survival. The Ming forces encircled the mountains, cutting off all supply lines. Le Loi's small band of fighters, numbering only a few thousand, found themselves trapped in the dense jungle, with no food, no clean water, and no shelter from the biting mountain cold. There were times when the rebels had to survive for weeks on wild roots, mountain herbs, and whatever game they could catch. When starvation reached its peak, Le Loi made the agonizing decision to slaughter his own war horses and even his personal war elephants to keep his men alive. During one of these desperate encirclements on Chi Linh Mountain, the Ming forces closed in on Le Loi's command post. The rebellion was on the verge of being snuffed out in a single afternoon. It was then that one of Le Loi's closest commanders, Le Lai, volunteered for a legendary act of self-sacrifice. Le Lai put on Le Loi's royal golden armor, mounted a war horse, and led a small, desperate charge directly into the Ming lines, pretending to be the rebel leader. The Ming forces, believing they had finally captured the pacifying king, focused all their energy on capturing and executing Le Loi. This heroic distraction bought Le Loi and his remaining men the precious hours they needed to slip through the imperial dragnet and escape deeper into the wilderness. But survival alone could not win a war. By 1424, after 6 years of brutal guerrilla warfare, the rebellion was stalled, exhausted, and confined to the narrow, impoverished mountains of Thanh Hoa. It was at this critical juncture that a commander named Nguyen proposed a radical shift in strategy. He argued that they should abandon their defensive positions in Thanh Hoa and launch a surprise offensive southward into Nghe An, a region with a large population, fertile lands, and defensible terrain. Nguyen Trai, the brilliant strategist, strongly supported this plan. Le Loi agreed. In a series of swift, unexpected maneuvers, the rebels slipped out of the northern mountains, bypassed the heavily fortified Ming garrisons, and swept into Mayan. The local population, weary of Ming misrule, welcomed them as liberators. Within months, Le Loi had transformed his struggling band of forest guerrillas into a massive regional army with a secure base of operations. By 1426, the strategic balance had shifted dramatically. Le Loi had consolidated his control over the southern provinces, building a massive popular army fueled by local recruits and abundant agricultural resources. The time had come to take the fight to the enemy's doorstep. Le Loi launched a daring, three-pronged offensive northward, aiming straight for the Red River Delta and the heavily fortified capital of Dongquan, modern-day Hanoi. The Ming Emperor, shocked by the sudden resurgence of the rebellion, dispatched a massive relief army of 50,000 men under the command of General Wang Tong. Wang Tong was a seasoned commander, determined to crush the rebels in a single decisive blow. The two armies converged near the swampy fields of Tot Dong and Chuk Dong, just south of Hanoi. The weather was miserable. Heavy autumn rains had turned the low-lying plains into a sea of thick, treacherous mud. Wang Tong, confident in his superior numbers and heavy cavalry, planned a massive pincer movement to trap and annihilate the rebel forces. But Nguyen, Trai, and Le Loi's commanders had intercepted the Ming plans. They turned the terrain into their greatest ally. The Vietnamese forces set up a brilliant ambush in the narrow, flooded passes. When the heavy Ming cavalry advanced, they found themselves bogged down in the deep mud, unable to maneuver. The Lam Son fighters, lightly armored and highly mobile, emerged from the reeds and rain, launching a devastating assault with spears, crossbows, and handheld firearms. The battle was a slaughter. The Ming army disintegrated, losing tens of thousands of men, and Wang Tong was forced to retreat behind the high walls of Dongquan, where he was promptly besieged by Le Loi's forces. But the Ming Empire was not done yet. Refusing to accept defeat, the Ming court mobilized a massive rescue force of 150,000 soldiers, split into two formidable armies, led by veterans Liu Shan and Mu Sheng. This was the ultimate test. If these relief armies linked up with Wang Tong, the rebellion would be crushed. Le Loi made a bold decision. Instead of focusing on the besieged garrison in Hanoi, he left a skeleton force to maintain the blockade and marched his main army north to intercept the relief forces before they could cross the mountainous border. The decisive clash took place at Chi Lang Pass, a narrow, treacherous valley flanked by steep cliffs and dense forests. On a rainy morning in late 1427, Liu Shan, leading the vanguard of the Ming army, was lured deep into the pass by a feigned retreat of the Vietnamese forces. Once the imperial cavalry was trapped in the narrow gorge, Le Loi's hidden troops unleashed a devastating barrage of boulders, arrows, and firearms from the cliffs above. Li Shan was killed in the opening minutes of the ambush. Deprived of their commander, the massive Ming army panicked and was systematically dismantled in the days that followed. The Second Relief Army under Mu Sheng, hearing of the disaster at Chilang, panicked and retreated in chaos, pursued and routed by Le Loi's victorious forces. With the relief armies destroyed and the garrison at Dongquan completely isolated, General Wang Tong knew that further resistance was futile. He was trapped inside the city walls, surrounded by a victorious, battle-hardened Vietnamese army, and cut off from any hope of rescue from China. Many of Le Loi's commanders, fueled by a decade of anger and the memory of brutal Ming atrocities, demanded that they storm the city and slaughter the remaining occupying forces to avenge the years of suffering. It was a moment that would define the moral character of the new nation. Le Loi, guided by the profound humanistic philosophy of his advisor Nguyen Trai, chose a different path. He knew that a massacre of the Ming garrison would only invite endless cycles of imperial vengeance and devastation. He wanted a lasting peace, not just a temporary victory. Le Loi offered Wang Tong an honorable surrender. He proposed a peace treaty that would allow the Ming forces to withdraw safely, but he went even further. In an extraordinary act of magnanimity that stunned both his own men and the defeated enemy, Le Loi provided the retreating Ming soldiers with thousands of horses, hundreds of seaworthy ships, and vast quantities of food supplies to ensure they could make the long journey back to China safely. This was not a gesture of weakness, but a masterstroke of statesmanship. It allowed the Ming Dynasty to save face, making it politically acceptable for the imperial court to abandon their claims on Jiaoqi and recognize Vietnam's independence. In late 1427, the last foreign soldier crossed the northern border, and the decade-long occupation was officially over. To mark this monumental achievement, Ming and Trai penned the Binh Ngo Dai Cao, the great proclamation of the victory over the NGO. This document, written in elegant classical Chinese, was read aloud to the nation. It was far more than a victory speech. It was a profound declaration of national identity, sovereignty, and humanism. It argued that the true purpose of military force is not conquest, but the preservation of peace and the protection of the people. In the spring of 1428, Le Loi ascended the throne in Hanoi, taking the reign name Le Tai Tu and founding the later Le Dynasty, which would go on to rule Vietnam for over 3 centuries. He had transformed himself from a provincial landowner into the sovereign of a free, unified, and sovereign nation. The story of Le Loi and the Lam Son Uprising is far more than a thrilling tale of military strategy and political triumph. It is a profound masterclass in the dynamics of asymmetric warfare and the power of moral legitimacy. For 10 long years, Le Loi was outmatched in every conventional metric of power. His enemy had more money, better weapons, larger armies, and the institutional weight of a global empire. Yet, the rebels won because they understood a fundamental truth that many empires, historical and modern, often overlook. Military might alone cannot sustain an occupation against a population determined to be free. The ultimate weapon of the Lam Son Uprising was not the sword, but what Nguyen Trai called nhan nghia, a concept often translated as benevolence, humanity, or justice. In the context of their struggle, nhan nghia meant aligning the military campaign with the welfare and survival of the common people. Le Loi did not fight merely to replace one ruling dynasty with another. He fought to restore the dignity and identity of his people. By treating the local population with respect, protecting them from plunder, and offering them a vision of a just society, Le Loi secured a bottomless well of popular support. The people fed his starving troops, hid his messengers, and joined his ranks, turning a localized rebellion into a truly national movement. Furthermore, Le Loi's victory highlights the critical importance of strategic adaptability. When their early guerrilla tactics in the mountains of Thanh Hoa brought them to the brink of annihilation, they did not stubbornly cling to a failing plan. Instead, they had the flexibility to pivot, marching south to build a new base and gather strength before launching their final offensive. And perhaps most remarkably, the conflict ended not with a bloodbath, but with a grand gesture of diplomatic pragmatism. By feeding and assisting his defeated enemies on their journey home, Le Loi demonstrated that true victory lies not in the destruction of the opponent, but in the creation of a stable, lasting peace. He proved that a small nation can successfully defend its sovereignty against a superpower, provided its leaders possess the patience to endure, the wisdom to adapt, and the moral clarity to put the humanity of their people first. This philosophy of governance was immediately put to the test as the smoke of battle cleared. In the spring of 1428, Le Loi ascended the throne as Emperor Le Tai Tu, founding the later Le Dynasty, which would become the longest ruling dynasty in Vietnamese history. To formalize this new era, he commissioned Nguyen Trai to write the Binh Go Dai Chao, the Great Proclamation of the Pacification of the Wu. This document, read aloud to the nation, was far more than a declaration of victory. It was a foundational charter of independence, asserting that Dai Viet possessed its own ancient culture, its own borders, and its own imperial destiny, equal to and separate from China. The proclamation famously declared that the drive to fight was born not from hatred, but from the desire to ensure the peace and prosperity of the common folk. This victory fundamentally reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Southeast Asia. The Ming Dynasty, chastened by their massive losses and domestic strain, officially recognized Dai Viet's independence, ushering in centuries of diplomatic relations based on mutual respect rather than outright subjugation. Domestically, the lessons of the 10-year struggle became the blueprint for state building. Le Loi and his successors embarked on sweeping land reforms, redistributing territory to the peasants who had supported the rebellion, and established a highly organized administrative system that culminated in the golden age of his grandson, Emperor Le Tan Tong. The memory of the Lam Son Uprising, of a ragtag band of rebels surviving on wild routes in the freezing heights of Chi Linh, became a permanent pillar of the national consciousness. It served as a timeless reminder that sovereignty is not a gift from powerful neighbors, but a hard-won right, preserved through unity, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to the welfare of the people. Today, the legacy of Le Loi and the Lam Son Uprising remains deeply woven into the cultural fabric of Vietnam. From the bustling streets of Hanoi to the quiet mountain valleys of Thanh Hoa, his name is spoken with reverence, and his statues stand as enduring symbols of national resilience and independence. The legendary Lake of the Restored Sword, Hoan Kiem, located in the heart of the capital, serves as a daily reminder of the peace he fought so hard to secure, where legend says he returned his divine weapon to a golden turtle once his mission was complete. But beyond the legends, the historical reality of his 10-year struggle offers timeless lessons for anyone interested in the triumphs of the underdog and the complexities of international diplomacy. It shows how strategic patience, ethical leadership, and a deep connection to the people can overcome even the most overwhelming odds. Now we want to hear from you. How do you think Le Loi's unique strategy of showing mercy to a defeated superpower shapes Vietnam's diplomatic philosophy and international relations in the modern era? Do you see parallels between the Lam Son Uprising and other famous underdog struggles throughout world history? Let us know your thoughts, theories, and questions in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this journey into the depths of Vietnamese history and want to discover more untold stories of courage, strategy, and survival from across the globe, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story.